Hey guys, Marty Miller here. It's good to be with you guys. I sometimes I just want to do a random podcast, just a random message. And so that's what I'm going to do. I have really very little in mind, but I want to share. I know that. And probably we've had a number of retreats recently, and we kind of analyze the size of our group, what the demographics are, what are the age um, categories that we see there. And the sweet spot I think of men's ministry is to interface with our younger men that are raising families. So, if you go to a church, the average age for men in the church probably going to be around 60, probably my age, in the 60s. But really, the age that we can affect the greatest change is when we're raising families. So that would be in the mid 20s to the mid 40s, 50s, somewhere in there. And during that time, we find that guys are extremely busy and really just beat down with all the responsibilities of life. So when we look at a retreat, we know that's a hard audience to get, but we have been trending downward in our men's retreats as far as the ages. And so to me, that's really, really encouraging. But a retreat, as good as a retreat might be, it's a flashpoint. It's a good experience, but then you go back to the valley. The last one we have is Built for Freedom. Had one up in Ohio just last weekend and the week before in Georgia. And collectively, we had a couple hundred guys. And you know, I I just love getting together at those kind of gatherings. It's a little bit stressful because I tend to be in charge of a lot, but I still just really enjoy the time that I'm able to spend with guys of all ages. Um, God shows up at these events. But back to the reason I'm really wanting to talk to you, and that is the guys that are in that crush of life. Let me explain. During the first 25 years of life, the brain and the body are developing, and you kind of peak out, or at least are fully baked, you might say, at the age of 25. The brain is fully developed, and you're able to really process in a way that you probably can't at the age of 15. We'll put it that way. So, birth to 25, we call this the cornerstone stage of life. It's setting your foundation, it's really your identity. The next stage, really, if you don't have that good foundation laid, you're going to have a lot of trouble. A lot of things are going to blow up in your life. So the next stage is from 25 to 45, and there's a lot of different parameters out there, different frameworks that you can read about, but this is my simple way of looking at it. So from 25 to 45 is this, you know, raising family. Your career is ramping up. Realities of marriage are pressing in. If you have some kind of an addiction in the background, it tends to blow up. You might, in that later phase of this time period, might have a midlife crisis or whatever you want to call it. So it's one of the most difficult times of life, 25 to 45. That's what we call the bondstone stage of life. Because the bondstone, if you're building a wall, if we're thinking about a blueprint and building a wall, the wall ends up being a very unstable unless we put some structural pieces in there. And a bondstone, if you're building with stone, is a big blocky piece of rock that kind of stabilizes. And I know my son and I, this summer we were building a retaining wall out of timbers. And you get enough dirt behind it, and these things will start pressing out over time. So we took a timber that we tied into the hillside, and by doing that, we're able to stabilize that wall, and it's not going anywhere. So that stabilizing force that needs to happen, the strengthening of the wall that needs to happen from that 25 to 45 is critical. And to me, that represents good relationship with God, with other guys that are going in the same direction. And you put childish things behind you. That's the simplest thing. I talk to a lot of guys that going through this stage of life from 25 to 45, the guys that put the childish things behind them and say, I'm a man, I'm married. Most guys get married during that time, and I've got children. I don't have the bandwidth for, golfing 18 holes every week. That's something that you put behind you. You might be able to enjoy that later on in life. Doing triathlons. Guys, I'm sorry. If you're from 25 to 45 and you're doing full-blown Ironman triathlons, either you are independently wealthy or you are just a freak of nature. But most people just cannot pull that off. I saw a meme once that said, if you are if you have a relationship and you're training for an Ironman, you're not training hard enough. And so that's a really troubling statement. So whatever we're doing, whether it's in the workplace or whether it's in recreation, that is beyond what is allowing us to be for our wife and children, we've got to assess. I've got to put that stuff away and start out the day with time alone with God. Anyway, I don't want to go down too many rabbit holes, but that's what we call the bondstone stage of life, and it really has to do with your strength. It's going to show whether you're strong or not. It can build your strength as well, but it mainly reveals weaknesses during that time period. And so you've got to strip away all the excess. Okay. Now, from 45 to 65, to me, that's your stage of influence. You've got kind of a track record, you've got relationships built up, you might even have some money in the bank starting to accrue, and you're starting to see the truth of life, you know? And so many beautiful things happen during that time period, 45 to 65. Many of us become grandparents, granddads, and the fruit of our life starts to come to bear. It's sweet or it's not. So what I'm getting at is this is the stage of influence. You're not feeling the pressure quite as much. It's still intense. Don't get me wrong. And if you go through a marriage breakup, divorce, and other kinds of adversities, maybe health issue, maybe it's a bankruptcy. I don't know. There are a lot of things can happen between that 45 and 65 zone. But if you've done things right, you have just a lot of sweet stuff going on, and you could have a lot of influence. So that is the keystone stage. Think of an arch, and that keystone piece right there, it's holding things together without taking quite as much pressure. The last stage of life, if we're thinking of an archway and a wall structure, at the very top is a capstone. And the capstone really is basically referring to the time of life of wisdom. Your influence may be waning, but you still have this whole life experience. And historically, the people that were still alive, guys that were still alive, the village elders, they tended to be in high regard. In today's world, unfortunately, somebody gets into the retirement phase of life and they just drift off into insignificance. That doesn't need to be you. Okay, that's for sure, guys. Now, let me go back to this time period from 25 to 45. I'm going to plant a seed for guys that are in that stage of life because we look at the summer season and we're getting into the school year and that cycle, and we're often running into maybe the fall activities. It can be really busy in the fall. If you're an outdoors person, you're always getting outside during the fall. The weather tends to be good. You're going camping. I love that time of year, but it's also a time, at least for me, I'm already thinking about next summer. I can't stress this enough. What are you going to do next summer? You just finished up summer, but what are you going to do next summer? What's your next year look like? I'm planting grass at my house right now. I just sowed some seed, put some fertilizer down, and actually I'm trying to follow a plan. My yard, over time, if you've got a yard, you notice that the weeds start getting more and more prevalent, and your grass starts looking really, really ratty. And so I'm going to go through a process this year of really being intentional about taking care of my lawn. Maybe I'm getting older, but with a little bit of effort, I think we can do this. So I reseeded the yard and I put down the fertilizer in the fall. You see, guys, planting in the fall is how you get the roots to go down. So that in the springtime, in the summer of the next year, you're going to have a nice green yard or maybe fruit trees that are going to grow and get established. I remember I've planted things in the springtime and it comes to the summer or scorching. And if those roots aren't established, that plant will struggle to make it. So anyway, if you are in this time of, well, any time of life, think about a year ahead. It just doesn't happen spur of the moment. I mean, things do happen, but the more our lives get busy and full, the more we have to plan things out. So here's where I'm going. Um, I am going to be updating, and it should be updated when this video goes out and podcast. But check out our events tab on our webpage. And when you go there, you can look all the way to the next year, and I'm going to have down Father's Day. Because, guys, out of all the calendar, the one day that stands out to me in the area of men and men's ministry is Father's Day. I've spoken to this before, but on this page, there are a bunch of resources, all right? And there are a couple that I just feel like, man, if I could get more guys to tap into these two resources, and I'm going to spend some time putting some curriculum together that's going to flesh this out. But the one is called the Adulting Blueprint. Now, we have a lot of young men today that are still at home later on in life, and they have it's this failure to launch. And part of the problem is they were not directed very well as they were growing up. So what I'd like you to consider is downloading that PDF. It's got categorical lists that you can check out, from everything from electrical about your house to automotive to identity, your identification, to, yard maintenance, things that a man, if he learns during his teenage years, by the time he's 18 and he launches out into the real world, if you've equipped him, you have given that young man such confidence. And a man that's confident is attractive to women. I'm just telling you. Not arrogant, not cocky, not that kind of confidence, but a humble confidence. Like, I know how to take care of myself. I know how to take care of a home. Know how to take care of finances. That's a rare young man in today's world, but it takes other men to grow young men up to be strong men of God. So look through that adulting blueprint. Now, that should be done over a period of years and reinforced. It's a checklist. It's really pretty simple, but please study it and put it into action. It can change your son and daughter's life. We need to equip our young people. What I've noticed is this. The more you can master discipline and skills in the early stages of life, the less brain power and emotional drain is going to take place on you later on in life, which allows you the bandwidth and the strength to do the greater things. So it's a gift that will be playing out the rest of the life of your children. Now, there's a secondary document, and this is really where I'm going with this. It's a building little podcast here, but it's directed at dads. And if you're a granddad, you can play a role in this too. Many of us need to play a surrogate father role. Maybe you've got a nephew. Maybe you've got a friend of your son that doesn't have a dad. Take those young men under your wing. I'm telling you, we've got to come together to do this. There's so many young men that are being raised without a dad. And even a lot of dads are not really there. So in this other document, it's called Manhood Rights and Blessings. Go download that, look it through. What it really has to do with is using this adulting blueprint and a framework of rite of passage. All right. Blessings and rite of passage. Think of it this way. You have a child, and all through life, they will always be your child, even when they're an adult. Isn't that right? They're going to always be your child. There is always an influence that you can have for the good. But if you don't start the influence for good early enough, it's going to be harder later on. There's no doubt about it. So from even before a child is born, I love to share this with young men that are going to have a baby, the wife's going to have a baby, is say, hey, this blessing idea is biblical. You want to give a blessing and a prophecy of good to your children. All right. So even before the child is born, place your hand on your wife's belly. That little baby, that boy or girl that's developing inside, put your hand on her belly and pray a prayer of blessing. And I've got an outline for how to do that in this document. I'm not going to go through it all, but it kind of follows the hand prayer that we're really big about here in this ministry. So do that starting before the child is born. When the child is born, pray a prayer of blessing for the baby and your wife, of course. We have a document in the Father's Day webpage that also is how to pray a prayer of blessing for your wife. It's one of the most powerful things you can do. So then, as they go through life, you're going to have this child dedication. Don't just passively take your child to the church and have this baby dedication. Get involved in that process. There are a lot of things that we need to take responsibility for more directly, and it's a joy. It really is. It really is empowering. Don't be passive. Then, as your child gets older and older and older, there are opportunities where they're moving into independence. Even going to first grade is a big step of independence, isn't it, guys? When they go away to school, they're going to be with somebody else all day long. And you want to say, hey, you're ready for this. I've taught you how to engage with people with respect and honor. I've taught you how to take care of your basics, prayer of blessing over that child as he goes or she goes to school. As they get older, hitting puberty, there should be a small little mini rite of passage. And then after that, a more major rite of passage. And so next summer, I know I'm going to take a select group of guys out west and we're going to do a rite of passage. And it's going to be prepped up towards, but then it's going to be a full week out there on the Rockies, doing a backpack trip, climbing a mountain, a solo day all alone. And most of these young men that are going on this trip are in the age of 15. I find that's a sweet spot for them to do something like this. They're on the cusp of getting driver's license and getting that level of independence. And they really need that kind of blessing. Like, you're ready for this. You're ready for this level of responsibility. And there's no guarantees in life. They're still going to make some mistakes, but it does make a difference for them to hear from their father that they are ready for the next stage of life. So anyway, guys, please take a look at these resources. Start thinking about next year. It'll be here before you know it. As you know, the older we get, the years just fly along. It's really just kind of scary where I'm at. So, guys, I want to prayer blessing over each one of you, whether you're a father or a grandfather. We need to reach into the younger audience and say, hey, how can we team up to build our young men into godly men? Most of us have deficits. Let's not repeat those deficits in our children and our grandchildren. Let's step it up, guys. And so let me just finish up with a prayer blessing for each one of you right now. Dear Lord, thank you so much for another day of life. Thank you for each man that is listening to this message. Dads, is a challenging thing. It's a daunting thing to be a parent, and we're not equipped. We need God's help. We need to learn, and we need to move forward with humility and confidence. Help us to do what we can. Granddads, if you're a grandfather, try to encourage your son or daughter to take action in ways that they can. Be intentional. And in so doing, I pray that the younger generation that's in front of us will be equipped and empowered to be strong men and women of God in a way that they would not have been without our leadership and help. Thank you so much for dying on the cross to redeem us and to restore us into your image, the blueprint for men. Thank you, Lord. Amen. Before I close out, I want to make a plug for a book I've got over my shoulder. And I know I've got this in on the Father's Day webpage, But please pick this up. The Intentional Father by John Tyson. It's a small little book. There's a number of books that are out there that are really good. This is a tiny little book and it's based on research from Barna. Please check it out. Get equipped, get moving, make a difference. Go out and do great things, guys. See you next time.